there is moral truth, and there are things that are ultimately and generically beneficial for others and ourselves, and things that are not beneficial for ourselves and others. But I just think, at least in my experience with God and in my journey with God and those who are also pursuing a path with God, it just doesn't seem so black and white. It doesn't seem so dialed in. And maybe that's because God is one way bigger than I could even imagine, and when I allow my imagination to go to good places, I think that's like just starting to tap into who God might be. And that opens up kind of the realm of possibility of who I get to interact with, who I get to call family, who I get to help, who I get to receive help from. I don't know, Jake, it kind of opens up the whole world and a spectrum of people when I stop trying to limit God. I think the more comfortable I am with God being boxed in, the more I'm going to not be okay with you being different than me. But the more I reason with God as much more vast and, eternal, come on, we can't even figure that out, then there's so much color in that, and there's so much beauty in that, and there's so much room in that for a lot of different people.
Welcome to episode 126 of the NRT Now podcast. I'm your host, Jake. And if this is your first episode with us, just want to say welcome. Or if you've been with us for a few episodes or more, just want to say welcome back. And if you aren't already, make sure that you are following, subscribed, whatever that looks like on your favorite podcast platform. Our guest for this episode is Andrew Greer, and you may have seen him on Dinner Time Conversations with Mark Lowry, maybe Empty Stage, which is over on the Caleb On Demand platform. But we're here to talk about a pretty cool project that he's been working on called Bellsburg, which is a celebration of the life and music of Rich Mullins. And I just absolutely love this conversation. I didn't realize it at the time when we started the conversation that we probably should have recorded this on a front porch somewhere in wooden rocking chairs with coffee in hand. Man, we took so many twists and turns, but I just love how we shared quite a few laughs, and had a Bible study, talked some music. Like, there's just so much in this conversation to unpack. I can't wait for you to hear that. But before we do, we are able to share just a quick clip of some of the music that's coming out from Bellsburg. Andrew references this song a little bit later in the podcast. So before we get to the conversation, here's a clip from what's coming out in Bellsburg.
Hold me, Jesus, I'm shaking like a leaf. You have been King of my glory. Won't you be my Prince of Peace?
We're here with Andrew Greer. So Andrew, I know we've seen and heard a lot from you, but would just like for you to introduce just a little bit about what we might have heard of your stuff, of your music. Sure. And stuff, and just where you've been in the industry here, so we can kind of get a sense for why it's so awesome to have you on the episode here.
Sure. Well, that's a packed question, a loaded question, Jake, just because it feels like I've been all over the place. My journey has certainly been kind of here and there and circuitous in a way. It started out with music, and Kevin and New Release Today have always been supportive as an indie artist and then as a songwriter for other Christian artists. And so music was my home base, and music is how I got started and involved in Christian music, both through records and through writing for other artists. But then gradually, I've always had a love of talking too much. And so how to channel that into a profession, right, is you get this as interviewing. And as the realm of podcasting became more popular about 6-7 years ago, or more mainstream, a friend of mine, Mark Lowry, and I decided that we loved like NPR podcasts that just really, got in deep with things. And just like you said about this one, where it's more human interest content than just what's your new song. And so we started inviting our friends around the table, and we decided we'd film it. Why not? If we're going to have these friends around the table, let's go and film it too, right? And that turned into a show that was on Prime for a good long time, on Amazon Prime, called Dinner Conversations. It's still on Apple Podcasts and YouTube and all that. And we just finished our 4th season. That turned into a podcast with my good friend, women of faither and author Patsy Claremont. We're in our 3rd season of that. And then even further than that. So now even though music is still a part of what I get to do. We're going to talk about that. I know today at a new Rich Mullins tribute project, Bellsburg, I get to do a really wonderful interview show called Empty Stage on Caleb On Demand, which is their new streaming platform, which I would encourage anybody to check it out. It's really beautiful, the quality and the product. And so conversation, I would say, whether that's through music or whether that's through the written word or whether that's through a conversation just like this, I think that's become or is becoming maybe the hub that everything I do, stems from. So at least that's how I know to explain it as of now.
Well, I've got to say that I owe you a huge thanks, even before this episode. Speaking of Mark Lowry, you connected me with Mark Lowry as he was coming through my area here. So I don't often get starstruck, but when I walked in the side stage and started the conversation with Mark, like, it was gone. I was gone. Like 10, 13-year-old me was just like all a buzz. And before I got there, on my way there, I'm like, okay, here's the jokes that I'm going to make. Here's the topic conversation. And as soon as that happened, like, it was just gone.
He is kind of our childhood, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, and definitely in the Southern gospel, like, there's some people that don't know who he is. I was talking with a cousin of mine who's, I want to say she's 10, 12 years younger than I am. And we all spent time at grandma's house, and we all spent time around her Gaither tapes and all that.
Right.
So I was talking with her. I want to say it was right after that. She doesn't remember that. Must have been like during my childhood more, during when I was growing up more. Like, I just felt sad because she missed out on so much of the Mark Lowry, so much of the Gaither stuff.
She must not have good humor.
Yeah. But,
yeah, I think, Mark is a wonderful guy. And of course, I mean, more than a brand of comedy, I think something I've learned from Mark is a brand of storytelling. He's truly interested in people. And so he's observed people, and he regurgitates that out in interesting ways. But he really, I'm thankful to Mark for, of course, he has a much larger platform than I do. And so that gave Dinner Conversations a lot of legs. And really, that's where a lot of the products I'm involved in today, even outside of the faith-based sphere, come from the experience, both in film and also in producing and in understanding what conversations mean and what they can mean to other people. Came from that era of us beginning Dinner Conversations. In fact, I'm at I'm at my friend's house right now, and it's the house where we film Dinner Conversations. I'm on the porch of that. And so, David and Shelley Breen, who are wonderful people and have been in the industry for years, are good friends. And we just asked them, can we use your kitchen? Because it's just open. It's easy to film in, right? And we didn't know what we were doing. So I was so grateful to them. So yeah, we're on the set of Dinner Conversations, Jake.
Man, we didn't plan this, but I feel like honored, like I'm on the wrong stage for this now.
Well, it's a beautiful day here in Tennessee, and it's not been pretty lately. And so I had to take advantage of it. And they've got a great porch. So here I am.
So you're from Texas. You're from the Dallas area here. So you know what I'm speaking about here with these hot summers. I totally understand that whole, when it gets warm and gets nice, you just got to be outside. You've got to like take advantage because it's not there for very long.
Yeah.
Some people have like a short summer. Like, you can only play softball for so long. You can only, do your outdoor stuff. Like, we're kind of like the opposite. Like, we have summer where you really don't want to do anything, don't want to be outside. And then you have the rest of the year, and you've just got to take it when it comes.
That's right. Summer in Texas is send me indoors, right? Everywhere else in the world, it's let's get out. But in Texas, it is send me indoors. And then the winter, it's beautiful. It's the time to be out. So I loved growing up in Texas. And, there's a real earthiness. I grew up west of Fort Worth, going towards kind of in between Fort Worth and Abilene, right? The beginning of all that ranch land and those plateaus and that big sky, and which is, Dallas really is kind of the gateway to West Texas, I think, as far as its landscape. But I do miss that. Being in Tennessee, we have, of course, gorgeous forest and wooded areas, and the fall is amazing, but I miss those huge skies, and they were so inspiring to me. They opened up my heart, and there's a real earthiness about Texas people that is real genuine. It can be a little straightforward, and some people can even see it as a little maybe mean, but I think where you stand, with Texans, and I think there's a beauty to that.
I love how you say kind of like the realness. I think that just kind of goes to illustrate just how different people are in different regions, and that isn't really a bad thing or a good thing, necessarily. It's just different.
That's right. It's just different. I think in a world that, how would I say this? I think in the name of diversity, we've become very homogenized, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't prize conversation maybe as much as we once did. We maybe don't take the time to sit across from one another and really listen to somebody. Then you have to say the right thing at the right times, at all times, or you're not heard. And that's not human. And so I think the beauty of having space to listen to one another and to respect one another. And I think people outside of metropolitan areas, I don't want to stereotype at all, because I don't want to be stereotyped either. We're all very nuanced, and, but what you're saying is different, right? It's not necessarily bad. It's just different. We may even disagree about something. That doesn't necessarily even mean you're wrong. It just means we have a different perspective. Now, there, of course, there is moral truth, and there are things that are ultimately and generically beneficial for others and ourselves, and things that are not beneficial for ourselves and others. But I just think, at least in my experience with God and in my journey with God and those who are also pursuing a path with God, it just doesn't seem so black and white. It doesn't seem so dialed in. And maybe that's because God is way bigger than I could even imagine, and when I allow my imagination to go to good places, I think that's like just starting to tap into who God might be. And that opens up kind of the realm of possibility of who I get to interact with, who I get to call family, who I get to help, who I get to receive help from. I don't know, Jake, it kind of opens up the whole world and a spectrum of people when I stop trying to limit God. I think the more comfortable I am with God being boxed in, the more I'm going to not be okay with you being different than me. But the more I reason with God is much more vast and, eternal. Come on, we can't even figure that out, Then there's so much color in that, and there's so much beauty in that, and there's so much room in that for a lot of different people.
As you're talking about that, kind of the analogy that comes to my mind is like, how many shades of white can you have on a wall? Yeah, there are different shades of white. It's not all the same white, but it's all the same shade of white. Yeah, at what point does that just become bland and monotonous versus color?
Right. Blues and purples and reds and browns and the whole spectrum. I've always thought, in the conversations we've had about race more recently, but we've been having for a long time, and we will have for a long time. There's no perfect solution to figuring out how to live together. But I just always grew up thinking how beautiful that I kind of thought, man, I'm just white. I'm that boring shade, so like that's why the summer was always great, because I actually, I'd get a little tan just being outside playing ball or whatever. And I was like, man, again, I just think there's so much to celebrate in that doesn't have to be harmful or hurtful, or that can actually be healthy and point to the health, the ultimate health we find, the ultimate wholeness we find in our identity with God.
The other analogy that comes, the biblical analogy is more along the lines, the body has many parts.
Yeah.
I love what you're kind of saying there with that about, in the name of diversity, trying to be homogenized. It's like we're removing all the different parts. Like, there's like a whole line that I think we could go on down this road, but
yeah, it goes far. But yes, it is scriptural for those of us who do find that the Bible is our plumb line, or one of our plumb lines in knowing God and knowing how to interact in the world around us. There's also the beautiful scripture about there's neither Jew nor Gentile, there's neither slave nor free, there's neither male nor female. We're all one under Christ Jesus, which takes us back to the very foundation of who we are. It's none of the above. It's all of the above, in the sense of our ultimate identification is, I think, as a child of God and as a sibling of Jesus.
I love being able to travel around and just interact with different people from different regions. And I'm kind of like that people watcher. Like, I just love to see how things work in different places. Like, I love the South, the Southern charm, but, I also love going up to like the northern states, like Pennsylvania, and just, it's a whole different life and it's a whole different perspective on everything. And I just love seeing the different just in our own country, there's just so much variance. There's just so many different ways of life without having to even get a stamp in your passport.
Yeah, even within these boundaries. And then you go outside of these boundaries and it gets even wider and more diverse. So to me, that's a freeing thought. It's a freeing experience. It's not one I'm afraid of. And I think the more we can press into it, and it takes a level of humility to interact with those we don't understand, and to allow those, it takes humility on the part of someone else to interact with me when they don't understand me. So, I was reading something this morning about like the miracles of Jesus that we read about in the New Testament. They weren't meant to be shocking or even awe-inspiring or even meant to affirm him as the Messiah, because if that was the point, it didn't do a good job, did it? It was more as an example for us of how to interact in the world around us, to alleviate suffering, to include people, to find people, to bring them in rather than shut them out. So I thought that was really beautiful, one, because it doesn't mean miracles don't still happen today. If the point of the purpose of these miracles was to show us how to live with one another, then we can still exercise that miracle, every day. So, yeah.
I think we discussed before this that we might go off on tangents, and I love it.
I'm good. I'm good with it too.
Yeah. So talking a little bit about your empty stage, I did see that announcement. That is what, a few months old now with the Caleb on Demand?
Yeah. So we're in our 4th episode. It's about an episode a month, part of their rollout in the summer, but it's continuing on. So we started with Tasha Layton, who's an incredible artist right now, an incredible person, and then we had Cece Winans, and then Blessing Offer, who's also a really great new artist, and Cody Carnes is coming up, and then Stephen Curtis. So we've got a lot, and we're just kind of continuing down that line. But what I love about it is it's not specific to just a Caleb radio playlist or any radio playlist. It's celebrating both the legacy of gospel music and also the present, and to some degree the future. But same thing as here, Jake. We're talking about things that I'm not totally interested in your new single. Now you can sing it on the show, but I'm interested in what is the motivation behind your purpose in life, and what is the what instincts are you riding on as a parent and as a professional? Because to me, someone listening or watching in can only relate so much to I wrote a new song today, but they can relate to my dad died unexpectedly earlier this year. And so those are the things I hope to inspire in conversation, because then it doesn't matter, one, when someone sees it, right? Yeah. They could see it 5 years from now and still potentially have an impact. But then two, it also doesn't pander to marketing. Instead, it gives way to humanness.
Honestly, that's a lot of the reason why I started this podcast as well. Is number one, I love being able to do those kind of conversations, whether video or podcast or whichever, because the difference between like a written article versus being able to see or hear somebody, like a lot of the human nuance in there just doesn't come through in the written word. And it just seems like it's just so easy anymore to release a video or, even the podcast here.
Sure. Our methods of being able to express ourselves have, become 100-fold from what they were even 20 years ago. And the ability to, our space for consuming content is incredible. I guess it always has been, and it just looks different. But anyway, yeah, I'm with you. I think in everything we have to weigh our hearts out. We have to weigh our motivations out. So in anything I'm doing professionally or personally, I've got to constantly weigh it out. And I'm not always willing to weigh it out. And then even sometimes when I am willing to weigh it out, I'm not always willing to reckon with the results of that weighing out if it's not going in my favor in the sense of what I want to happen right now. And so I'm not saying that as someone who is a good weigher outer, but that is what I think each of us have to ask of ourselves. And I do think our journey with Jesus is asking for us to do.
You mentioned Tasha Layton being your first one.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Tasha before she became, it's just been incredible to see her journey in the short 2.5 years that, I think it's almost 3 now, that she's really hung up her shingle and gone out to business, so to speak. Because she was, I think, episode 11 or 15 on this podcast here.
Wow.
Her first EP hadn't come out yet, or was just coming out. And to just hear her tell that story, her journey has been incredible, from growing up in the church to rediscovering her faith, and then with not being able to have kids and then suddenly having kids, and like
Mhm.
her whole journey listening to Christian music and connecting with artists. Like, I love that realness and that testimony aspect to it more than just a creative writing session. Or I love connecting with that a lot more
Mhm.
than just the song on its own.
Well, there's more to relate to, right? No matter who you are, no matter what your profession is, no matter what your personal life looks like, no matter what church you go to, uh, all of that, no matter what your past is, present, or what your future is going to be, it's so much more relatable to hear about someone's journey because we're all on a journey. And so Tasha has that really extreme version of a spiritual journey or a religious journey that has then informed her spiritual faith. And I think more people experience that than they're able to admit within the confines of the evangelical culture. And when I say evangelical culture, I don't mean within the church, the universal church or the kingdom of God. I mean the confines that we construct for whatever reasons. They're not all bad and they're not all good, but there are a lot of people who have a lot of questions. And come on, to exercise faith has to be to exercise questions because I don't know it all and I'm not going to know it all. And I don't even think it's fun to want to know it all because here's the deal. If I'm going to live forever in communion with God and I don't get to take a long nap, maybe we do. I hope we get to take some kind of nap. But if I'm going to live in communion with God forever, I sure don't want to have our relationship figured out off the top. You know what I mean? I sure hope that he is so expansive that the relationship will never get to the bottom of it. So the adventure is constant. I mean, it never stops. So if that is true, then how would we think in this limited existence, I wouldn't have tons of questions.
Well, and we only have this finite understanding. Sometimes the joy is in discovery as much as it is the end result.
100%. Now, different personalities, different strokes, different folks, right? And I do love finished product. I mean, I am on this podcast today because of the finished product. So I like to finish product, but the researcher in me and the interested part of me doesn't want to dial everything in right away.
So kind of rounding towards, the main reason for the podcast here and the producer side of your life, we have a new project coming out that is in celebration of Rich Mullins, which I find this kind of interesting, like us old timers, which, I mean, we're not really that old timer-ish.
No, not yet, but we're getting there.
Inching forward every day.
Uh-huh.
But, we remember Rich Mullins. He was kind of one of the leaders in the CCM industry. Some of the younger listeners, some of the newer generation doesn't know unless, so one of us has it on for, or one of the radio stations is playing like a oldie but goodie kind of situation. So I'm really interested to see why you chose to do this project, what kind of the inspiration was. What was it about Rich Mullins that brought you to do a whole tribute album that's double-sided, that's, if you can say double-sided digital release?
Yeah, it's right. It's right. Yeah. It's, two things, Jake, on a practical side and then more on an inspirational side. But one was I have been involved with kind of the Rich Mullins legacy over the past 5 years since the 20th anniversary. This fall will be the 25th anniversary since Rich Mullins passed on, since the car accident that took his life. And he was just a couple years older than I am now. So that's interesting to start thinking about because I was in junior high or middle school or something. So during the 20th anniversary 5 years ago, I was asked to write a book by a publisher here in Nashville that really was kind of an editing process because I collected thoughts from a lot of different artists and different family members and people involved in his life. And that became a book called Winds of Heaven, Stuff of Earth, which of course is similar to a title of one of his records and then subtitled Spiritual Conversations Inspired by the Life and Lyrics of Rich Mullins. So that kind of got me into the fold. And then a couple years later, I was introduced to Chris Hoisington of a band called the Brothers McClurg, who used to be on Integrity and now are a great indie band up in Buffalo, run an indie label called Old Bear Records. Just fantastic. They've been doing a lot of Kevin Max's new stuff and then a lot of indie folk kind of Christian artists, and they have a real great musical palette. But Chris is about my age, but had not been introduced to Rich Mullins when he was growing up. It was when he was an adult through the B-side of the Jesus record, which was the demos that Rich Mullins did for his last record that then people like Amy and Michael and Jimmy Abeg and the Ragamuffins recorded in a studio and released in 1998 or 99. And so that B side, just the demos of him at his piano or with his guitar in that old church next to his house, push and play and record at the same time on a cassette deck, that's what charmed Chris Hoisington. And so he started talking to me about that after we were introduced. Then we start talking about Connie, who lives in Rich's house just west of Nashville. And she has lived in that house since before Rich died. And he kind of bestowed it upon her, the responsibility of it, because it's always been an open door policy in that house. Travelers have always come in and out. Rich used to have big birthday parties there with he used to invite an audience of 2,500 people the night before. Come to Nashville tomorrow, come to my house. It's not a big house. It's an old house, but it's not a big house. Connie still lives there and has kind of stewarded his legacy through that house. And so Chris had said, what if we record it in Rich's old house, which is 100 plus years old, creaky wood floors, traffic going by out kind of in the country. So tractors and motorcycles. And we talked to Connie and she said, you're crazy, but you're welcome to do it. And we did, because it's not a studio recording. We put up a couple of mics in that old living room where he used to host parties and where he wrote songs and where Ashley Cleveland used to come over before she was Ashley Cleveland and kind of bounce song ideas off of him. And, there's something about after someone's gone from this physical kind of existence that the space they inhabited becomes kind of hallowed, right? Yeah. Because that's where the memories of them are. That's where they lived this life that we experience now. That's where they created. That's where they loved. And so we wanted to get into the fabric of that for this record, but we wanted it to be a multi-artist thing. So we just asked artists, everyone from, I got to do a great song, Cindy Morgan and I, with Amy Grant called Sparrow Watcher that many Rich Mullins fans won't have even heard. Carolyn Aarons did a new Rich song that's never been recorded called Whitewater that's absolutely stunning. You have people like Andrew Peterson, of course, with his buddies Ben Shive and Andy Gullahorn that he travels with a lot and writes with a lot. And they did a great old Rich song called Hello Old Friends. Sarah Groves did Hold Me Jesus. And you think no one can do Hold Me Jesus like Rich, and they can't. But Sarah sure can get close. It'll make you weep. And so we just kept collecting artists. And you know what, Jake, it got to be 18 tracks. And so we had to split it up into side one, side two. And I think what's cool is we included at the end of each side, we included a Rich Mullins recording that's never been heard before, very much in that demo fashion, and a Rich song that's never been heard before. And so you hear all these voices who are recording his songs in the space he lived and created in, and then the capstone, kind of the anchor of that record, becomes Rich's own voice in the same style that we recorded it in. So that's the vision of the record. That's the heart behind the record. It comes out in November in full, though there will be tracks that release from now until then on streaming. And of course, it's also will be available next year in vinyl. Vinyl's way backed up across the world. And so it'll be next year, but it will be in physical form as well, even in CD form. We found that maybe because of the era Rich was in, and a lot of people wanted CDs. And so we did a special booklet for the CDs so that you can really get into the space of the recording. And then we'll be finally releasing a mini documentary about the process. There's a 6 to 7 minute trailer about the record and the documentary already on YouTube. And it just kind of invites you into the home, into the space. Last thing I'll say about that, and then I'll stop running my mouth. But David Mullins, his brother, who's kind of the torchbearer of Rich's legacy, he came in with his son, who was only 4 or 5 when Rich died, but has been immensely impacted by his uncle's legacy. So his son, Jonathan Mullins, played the guitar, and David Mullins, his brother, sang a song called Hard to Get, which is, we were talking about doubts and questions earlier. I think that was the draw of Rich's music a lot of way, and even more of his life, is that he was willing to kind of be put on display with all those doubts, all those expressions of questions. And Hard to Get is a song that does that enormously, overwhelmingly, and beautifully.
I feel like we should pause for some of the younger listeners. Like,
Sure.
what is like an A side and a B side? Like, what is a CD? Like, what is
Yeah,
a cassette?
totally. So, okay, so all you youngins, back in the day, there was a thing called vinyl. Now, that was before mine and your time too, for the most part. And so you put it on a record player, you drop a needle on it into those grooves, and you hear music. And of course, now some of you younger folks will know that because vinyls have had a huge resurgence. When you can get a record player in Walmart, you know it's back. But then CDs were these mini vinyls that you put in your car and your boombox. But the record's called Bellsburg, and then the subtitle is The Songs of Rich Mullins. Bellsburg is the little unincorporated town where his house is. So everything, even the album cover, is a picture of his house. And regardless of how you hear it, listen to it, whatever era you're in, here's what I love for the people who are 40 and under. I think it's recorded in a style that we've come to assume as our own, which is that Americana folk. Don't pretty it up too much. And, we kind of came up of age in the digital era. And because of that, I think we like shine, and we got a lot of shine, but we wanted to rub some of that shine off to see what was underneath. And I think that's perfectly rich, don't you? To not let it shine or glitter too gold, because there's a lot of stuff, would be the right word for this podcast, underneath all that.
Just the lo-fi, just being able to connect with it. I mean, I love the production. I love a well-crafted album where every time you listen to it, you hear just that one little detail that you didn't hear before.
Extra thing.
Yep. But just being able to strip down and just get to the heart of what it is. A buddy of mine, John Tibbs, released an album.
Yeah.
What was it? I think it was middle of last year, where he just had his acoustic guitar.
Yep.
And I think what turned into his baby's room eventually.
Yeah.
And just sang some old hymns, or there's just something, the rawness of not overproducing it and just being able to be in the moment. It really connects with the subject matter.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that, and I'm honored to hear you say that. As musicians too, we've been prettied up a lot, and sometimes it's nice to not have to get all dressed up and just show who we are. And I got to record a track Cindy and Morgan and I did with Amy Grant called Spare Watcher that I was mentioning earlier, and we went to rehearse it, or run over it at her house a week before we did it at Rich's house, and we were all commenting about. In fact, she was asking me, she was like, "Andrew, what's the vibe? What's the tone of the recording? Where are we doing this?" And I said, "We're doing this house. We've talked about that." I said, "But just around a couple mics, we'll take the best take." And she said, "Isn't that refreshing?" Yeah. And coming from an industry vet, right, who's done everything, it is refreshing. And then when we got in there, what it also creates is moments between the musicians. And Cindy, Amy, and I got around one microphone, and then across the room from us is Tommy Sims. And Tommy told us the story of getting his first start in the music industry on the recording side with Rich and Rich Mullins record. And so you have all this, and of course Amy was a huge part of Rich's becoming rich to the general population, because she recorded his songs, and she took him on huge arena tours, and she really introduced him to the public. And so and then Cindy has some real specific stories, and then I'm representing more of the listener in the sense of I was growing up with it. I didn't know Rich personally. I wasn't in the industry at that point in time. And so there's just so much full circle beauty. And then to be in the room where his spirit just was so free and lived and created. And I know this can seem kind of hoo-ha-y, but there is something very magical about the connectivity of forever. We are not, the veil is very thin. One of my really close friends' husband just died this morning, fairly unexpectedly, but he was older. And I mean, he's been in a lot of pain for a couple of years, and maybe even more than that. So to be honest, when I talked to her yesterday, and then I could even hear his labored breathing in the background, I thought, is that, it was almost exciting to go like the separation from what is and what always was and will be. There is no separation for him now, so there's an excitement to that. And I think we tap into that a little bit when we do communal things, and when we involve music, and when we think about someone who's gone before us. There's just something very, very special about that.
Yep. So one of the other things that I really love, just seeing like the one sheet, seeing some of the stuff that's coming out about this, is just the breadth of who's on this. And I've been talking about these guys a little bit more lately, Stephen McWhorter and Jason Claiborne, because they've turned into, they're not here to defend this, so I'll say that they've become friends lately. And just seeing how they come together and their two styles mash and just create something super special. You know, and seeing people like Taylor Linhart on here as well, and just all these different styles that come into this. I mean, like I said, I don't remember a whole lot from Rich, if I'm honest. You know, like I said, I remember Awesome God. I remember a couple different things, but I don't, you know, it's not someone that I like really grew up intimately with listening to the music or anything, but just what I catch. I mean, I really catch that would be the beauty that he would love to see if he were still making music today. Is just bringing everybody to the table, bringing different sounds, bringing different voices, just not having something that just sounded the same every time, just that singer-songwriter piece to it. I can really see that this would be something that would connect just all the different voices that go into this.
I hope so. I mean, the biggest compliment would be, I think Rich would like it, right? And after one of the sessions, someone said that they were like, I think, who knew him?
Yeah.
I think Rich would really like this. Or it was during Jason and Steven's session that got real kind of gospel-y and soulful. And one of Rich's close friends, Beth Lutz, who got to hang out some with us, she still lives elsewhere, but she said, Rich would die to hear this, you know? And I said, well, he may be, you know? So, so what you've said is, I hope so. And so wonderful to have, again, Taylor Linhart would be on the younger side, the younger generation of artists involved. So it shows that his legacy does live on, is still impacting people, and there may need to be some introductions along the way. But it shows also the songs stand with or without Rich, and what a testament to a song as a songwriter. And of course, as Rich as a songwriter, that's like the ultimate compliment, is that you don't have to be the one singing it and it still stands.
As a creative, you know, it's always interesting to see what resonates with people once you step out of it. And it would be interesting to me if we're able to have that conversation with Rich, you know, if he were still here. What does it mean that these are the songs that were put on this album, that these were the ones that were chosen, that these were the ones that resonated? You know, like that third party perspective, that's something that sticks with me sometimes. You know, like I said, when you step back and what is it that we have in our own minds of what we think is going to connect and what hits us hard, but that would be intriguing for me to hear him answer that question.
Well, Jake, I asked him. I'm just kidding.
This almost got weird here for a second.
That was my hope. That'd be great if I'm like, well, guess what?
Yeah. I think it'd be a whole different podcast.
Right? He's not dead.
He's kicking it with Elvis somewhere.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can only hope. You know, it's all a guessing game. Ashley Cleveland told me when I was working on the book 5 years ago and doing interviews around it, she said, I think it was Ashley. I hope it was her that I'm attributing this to, but she or someone like Ashley had said, a lot of people will say they own a piece of Rich, or will kind of assume that they knew, you know. She said, I think that's what she was saying. They'll say they know a lot, or they knew a lot, or they would know his thoughts and opinions. And she said, no one owns Rich. And she essentially was saying that to give me the freedom to explore the paths that were in front of me, that opened up in front of me, that there was no wrong way to go about it, which is really cool because there's a lot of energy around the Rich legacy, even though it's smaller in size now or in footprint. There's a lot of energy around that. And that's true of anyone who I think dies short of their time and so hasn't kind of laid out all those things for others to know how to behave and act or what they want. They just kind of died mid-sentence, and the others are left to complete the sentence. That's a hard thing to do, but I don't mind it. I like the space to go, well, what if? And I think just because if I died mid-sentence and someone wanted to complete my sentence for me, I'd be happy for him to try. Yeah. I got no protection over that. You know what I mean? Do your thing. So I hope Rich would be pleased in that way. We did our thing, and we'll see what happens.
Well, Andrew, we're excited for it all to come out. Both sides, all the singles that are coming out here. Excited to see this, fully play out here, and Man,
Thank you.
excited for the next empty stages. Like I feel like there's a whole lot we could just be excited and say, Andrew, we're excited for. So we'll just cover it all. We're excited for everything, Andrew.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you. It means a lot.
And like I said, just definitely appreciate you taking the time to chat with us here.
You bet.